Hey everybody, I'm Chris.
Hey, I'm Bill.
Have you ever asked yourself, what is your superpower?
Everyone has a superpower. Most people just don't know what it is.
We're going to help you uncover it.
This podcast is all about helping people figure out what their truly unique superpower is.
Superpowers, what's yours?
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Superpowers podcast. I'm Bill. I'm here with my co-host Chris. We have an exciting guest with us today. We're all in our black T-shirts, so clearly we're important. We're entrepreneurs, and it's going to be a good one, Chris.
We're here. Nick's is a little bit tighter, but it's darker. It's an official.
Are you saying I'm fat?
I mean, we'll cover that, but I'm just saying I can tell it's a new shirt for the show. As Bill already has pointed out, we have Nick Jordan here on our show, and we're really happy to have you here, Nick. We've known each other for, 4 or 5 years. Obviously, investor in your current company, Narrative, which we're going to talk about. So thanks for coming here. I know you're very busy, and it was really hard to get you booked, but you made it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're going to get into a lot of stuff today. So let's rewind the tape, Nick. Give us a little bit of give us a story. Where are you from? Where were you born? What part of the country?
What was little Nick like growing up?
Yeah. You don't want to know.
Yeah.
I was born in Western New York in a small town called Olean, about 60 miles south of Buffalo.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Yeah, well, I'm a Bills fan, a Sabres fan. It's a sad existence.
The only New York football team, by the way.
Agreed, and I say that all of the time to people in New York City, and they're nonplussed by it.
Hold on a second. They're the only teams that are actually winning.
That's true.
Giants Jets thing. I mean, so you're fine.
Yeah,
you're winning
this year.
Okay.
But actually, I moved around a lot as a child. I was actually thinking about this morning. I think I lived in 14 different towns by the time I graduated high school. So the joke is, whenever I move into a new place, I never know. I never learn what the light switches do because you would never stick around long enough to actually understand. So
what did your parents do that you moved around?
My dad ran a multinational manufacturing operation, and so they had plants in South Carolina and in Mexico and in New York and in Georgia and all of these different places.
What was the best and worst place that you grew up in?
They were all kind of crappy. That's actually,
manufacturing. Welcome.
I mean, that's actually not true. They were all great, but they were all small towns. And so, right after graduating college, I very much wanted to get to the big city and get to where the action was. And I moved here right after I graduated from St. Bonaventure University to get a little bit more of the big city life. And I've been here or San Francisco ever since.
Before you got to the big city, what do you learn living in a little city? What are you forced to sort of discover about yourself, whether it's being creative,
other than like cow tipping and
talking to yourself? Or
yeah, I mean, it's how far you have to go into the woods to have a party before the cops can find you. Sure. There's the whole cow tipping. You have to entertain yourself. There's not a lot to do, and this is before the internet was a big thing, and so there was a lot of wiffle ball. And I was talking to someone the other day about the Jordan Jammer. I mean, we would just play in the backyard and sort of entertain ourselves over time.
I'm wondering, like, in terms of successful entrepreneurs, how many people grew up in kind of small towns where you're forced to keep yourself busy, you're forced to be be it's something we've had a couple.
We've had a couple of guests already where they've
100%
Vancouver Island and that sort of thing. Yeah. Okay, so you've had this sort of experience. You've moved around a lot. Anything sort of fun through that experience as relates to, like, what did you do? Do you have any side hustle at that time? Were you like selling Matchbox cars or yard sales, or like did you work at the local deli?
No, I did the lemonade stand thing as a kid.
What did you charge for lemonade in a small town?
It was probably a quarter.
Okay.
So you get the parents to pay for the lemonade mix.
It's the best arbitrage ever.
Right, exactly. We had zero direct costs, and so it was a high margin business.
Okay. Did you think at that time? Did you ever envision? Well, how old were you? Roughly around this stage?
Called 6-7 years old.
Okay, that's young. So, did entrepreneur or sort of starting? Okay.
I didn't know what the word meant. And actually, I've told people that I never really had the drive to be an entrepreneur. I didn't grow up saying I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to start something. Entrepreneurship kind of found me. I found a problem, and then I think the problem needed fixing, and I looked around and no one else was doing it.
Yep.
And so I ended up here. But it was never really my objective in my career. My passion is to
and
be an
so
entrepreneur.
Siblings? You have siblings?
I have a younger sister. She's 10 years younger than me.
Oh, wow.
And so I was an only child for 10 years, and then she came along, and it was kind of the perfect thing because it was just at that age where I was trying to become a little bit more independent.
Yep.
And my parents became a little bit more focused on her and let me go be little Nick.
Has your sister thanked you profusely for laying down the groundwork of all that first child syndrome? You got to know, Bill, because you have 3. I have 2, so that I'm guessing your sister had kind of a layup, right? They just left her alone.
Yeah, I mean, she definitely had it easier. She was also better behaved than I was, and so not only did I lay the groundwork, I was a bad child and partied through my teenage years, and so she didn't have a very high bar to clear in order to be the good child.
All right, so you go to college.
Yep.
What are you studying? What are your interests?
Yeah, I went to St. Bonaventure University. Go Bonnies.
Yep.
My degree was in computer science. I knew from I was probably 13 years old, and I wanted to be, I think we called them programmers back then. We didn't call ourselves engineers, but I was really into computers. That was my passion. It was hard. I went to school in 1997, so right around the time of the dot-com bubble, and at the time everyone was getting into computer science because that's where the money was. And I think of the 40 or 50 people that started in my freshman year in computer science, I think maybe 7 of them made it to the sophomore year.
Wow.
Right. A lot of people were chasing it because I thought that's where the money was, but it turns out that it's a little bit harder.
I'm surprised at that stage there was even there's sort of a conceptual piece that there was money then. I still thought it was like doctors and attorneys and that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, just remember in the mid to late 90s, the raw exuberance of the market.
Money rushing
in.
Companies
that didn't exist 4 years earlier were $10 billion.
Right.
Totally. And this wasn't this was not a technical school. This wasn't MIT or Harvard. I mean, this was a small school in Western New York, but I think even there was sort of a drive that this was the next big thing, or this was the hot thing.
Sure. What was your college experience like? What did you enjoy it? Were you good
at
school?
I enjoyed it quite a bit. So I didn't buy a book after my freshman year. I didn't,
because that's drinking money.
Yeah, that is exactly it. My parents would give me, $800 at the beginning of the semester.
Same one.
Did you guys have that? And maybe there's
and by the way, I went to school in upstate New York.
What's that program where you don't have to buy the new ones, so you can wait for the used ones and you spend less money? Is that sort of a common thing, or is that just where I went to school?
It's what upstate New Yorkers do.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. It's called buying books.
Yeah, but on the cheap.
You never buy
on the cheap. No, you
never.
By the
way, because the best part about buying used books is it comes with the highlighting already done.
Yes.
Right.
Well, the problem is the book companies know this, so they pay the professors to upgrade to the new editions. So you have to buy the new books.
And maybe some gum. You find some gum in there.
Yeah. So no books, no notebooks. I actually stopped going to class, most of my junior and senior year, I think. And so, I think my GPA that I graduated was like a 2.1. We're not talking, an all-star in school. But, the way I learn isn't to sort of be lectured at and sit there and, memorize things from a book. I'm much more, interact with someone, ask questions, debate in some ways.
So when you weren't buying books and weren't going to class, were you working on something, or were you just...
partying, really. Friendships, going out. I think I probably learned more socially in those 4 years than
I've long said, and I've told my 2 older kids this. College often, unless you're going to study like you want to be a doctor, you want to be even a lawyer eventually, you want to be an accountant. That's great, but college is really about maturation into adulthood, because many kids, particularly in this day and age, just aren't ready to deal with real life.
Yeah, and I wasn't either.
Yeah.
I throughout my life, I feel like I've matured like 3 or 4 years later than my peer set, and so a lot of college was just sort of figuring out things that I probably should have figured out in college. Getting those social skills, understanding what I was passionate about, the things that maybe I wasn't passionate about, and it was much less about the academics. And especially, computer science is a theoretical study. They don't teach you, how to, start a startup and write great code.
There's no application to what this degree actually refers to in a real world. Right?
And actually, if you started learning a language your freshman year, by the time you get to your senior year or graduate, that's extinct. There's a new language.
Yeah, it was C++ my freshman year, and then Java my sophomore year, and then they sprinkled in a couple of other things. But it really wasn't about the languages at all. It was about the theory behind the syntax and the.
So now we're basically barely getting through school.
Yeah.
You kind of scrape.
No, he's happily getting through school.
Right. Yeah. I actually I didn't want to walk across the stage in my college graduation. The graduation itself didn't mean that much to me. My parents said we spent $120,000.
We need to see you up there. We want the fucking
stage.
photo.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so now this career opportunity opens up. What did you do first in your?
Yeah, so this is actually an interesting story. So my senior year at college, there was a local entrepreneur, and again, we're in sort of rural Western New York, and so don't picture sort of Silicon Valley startup entrepreneurship. But there was someone locally who had an idea for a company. It was basically fulfillment in the cloud before the cloud was a term. But there's a bunch of companies that want things shipped around, and at the time they were either picking up the phone to do it or they were typing things in. And so he basically built a fulfillment company in the cloud and launched it. What he didn't tell any of his customers is he didn't actually have any technology. He had built a static website, and when someone would order something, it would send an email to someone, and that person would go change the inventory online manually, like in Front Page, the web editor. And so he hired me as a college senior to make it into a real product. And it was the ideal first experience because there was, it wasn't a glorified apprenticeship. It wasn't an internship. It was, you have to go build this thing. And I had no idea how to do it. No one at the company had any idea how to do it. And I kind of just had to figure it out.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because in that sense, you already had, or it sounds like he already had customers.
He did.
In a lot of cases, you build something to attract customers. In this case, he's already selling shit. He just didn't have, they just didn't know that the cloud didn't exist.
Well, I actually think that's
called
a typical way startups work today.
Right. But that obviously led him to saying that, hey, we need to actually kind of, build something.
It's basically like, wow, people are buying this. We should go build it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And the funny, if you go 12 years after I left, so I worked there for a couple of years after college and sort of, was the effective CTO for those first couple of years. Rakuten actually acquired the company 6 or 7 years ago. And so,
wow.
I never would have guessed it. And I bet they still have some of my code running in production. They should go fix that.
And of course,
ASAP.
you were smart enough to get some equity there.
I had no idea what an option was.
100%.
Did you get equity or not?
I did sign something, but I didn't know I had to then buy it after I left. It was fast and loose with some of the legal documents there, so who knows what I even signed.
By the way, another thing we should look at, our researchers here at the podcast should look into is what percentage of people get equity and have no idea? I bet you it's a majority.
Yeah.
The majority, right? Or understand exercise, or
the
whole thing.
Yeah, I had a discussion with someone last week, sort of breaking down what a preferred share is versus what a common share is, and why that matters, and why it's important. And it's it's mind-numbing stuff, but if part of your compensation is relying on it, you should probably understand it.
Yeah. Okay. So that was that was kind of your first taste. You enjoyed it. You were building something.
So how'd you get out of upstate New York? What's the next move?
Yeah. So. I actually have a family member that was doing some consulting for I guess it was the 2000, man, I'm going to date myself, the 2004 Olympics. They were actually managing the security and the process for the torch relay in Athens. And they needed to build a system that could actually take all of the torch bearers and figure out where on the relay they would go. And sort of manage it from a software infrastructure perspective. And, as you can imagine, they don't sell off-the-shelf software to manage torch relays. It's not something that happens.
There's not a huge market for that.
I'm thinking it's not a recurring business model either.
Well, it's recurring. Just
every 4 years.
Yeah, every 4 years.
Yeah.
And so, convinced them based on what I had done at Webgistics that I could help them build that software. And so basically became a consultant for, 18 months. Sat in my moved to Jersey City, sat in my apartment, and wrote code most of the day, and then sort of experienced what it was like to be.
It's funny how you parlayed a job supporting the Olympics in some capacity off of your Western New York, your first gig.
Yeah, I'm actually worried we're all going to get sued because I've brought up the Olympics before, and the International Olympic Committee is nonplussed when I say that I did some work for them. So just be warned that you may get cease and desist letters.
Okay. We're ready for it.
Yeah.
So then what?
What did I do then? I actually went to work for an actual consulting company. So my thesis was I'll go do this Olympics thing, and then I'll go build this huge portfolio of clients, and I'll do all this custom work.
I want to kind of get in your head a little bit. So was there ever a master plan?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to make $1 million before I was 30. I had no idea how one made $1 million. I had no plan on how I was going to do that, but that was the.
So that drove you.
Yeah, that was what drove me. I failed. I did not make $1 million before I was 30.
Okay.
So it didn't work.
Yeah.
But yeah, that.
Were you more focused on sort of these projects? What was your your social life like? Were you hanging out with friends? Were you dating?
We had a big friend group.
You were still partying. We already know you're a big partier. So did that
in
continue?
my 20s in New York City, we had some times.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to bring some of those guests on. I want to get into a company that probably a lot of our viewers have heard of, which is Tapad, and how you got that position, what you did.
Skipping
there.
over our Right Media days.
Yeah, I know. Come on now.
Sorry. Okay.
We
I
had-
didn't
we
forget
had
about
a-
the time. I
we
forgot
had a
about the
time.
Right Media connection. We do have to cover that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We can do that.
Okay. I mean, my only real story is I actually ran into one of our shared colleagues a couple of months ago, and they had just talked to you, and we were actually sharing an office space. It was Dave Simon.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, I just ran into Bill, and I brought you up." And I was like, "Oh yeah, how's Bill doing?" He goes, "Yeah, he was like Nick Jordan. He used to tell me to go fuck myself on a daily basis." And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds like 30-year-old Nick. Lots of opinions and usually telling people to go fuck themselves."
Yeah, listen, it's effective.
Yeah.
So what was that period of time? What was that overlap?
So I think it was 2007 to 2010, Right Media / Yahoo.
Yep.
You were doing a bunch of yield work, if I remember.
Yeah, so I was brought in after Yahoo had invested in Right Media, but before we had acquired Right Media.
Yep.
And Yahoo, in all of its infinite wisdom, and they were actually smart here, realized that they didn't understand anything about non-guaranteed advertising.
Yep.
And I had been working for a company that was doing some search stuff, which had some of the same sort of mechanics of what programmatic turned out to be. And so, they brought me in to effectively help liaise between Yahoo and Right Media post the acquisition.
Okay.
So, to help Yahoo figure out how to get value for its core business out of Right Media. Again, I think I was probably an abject failure there. And if you look at how Yahoo leveraged Right Media,
I'm going to play it back. It's like, hey, Nick, we just paid hundreds of millions of dollars for this thing. Can you actually help us make sense of it?
Yeah, help figure out how we use it, right?
Yeah,
You buy a
yeah.
Ferrari, I don't know if people read the owner's manual or not, but maybe they
Right.
should, and then figure out the best way to get the most performance out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think Yahoo is a great company, had great products. I think the acquisition was genius. And actually the execution was really, really valuable. I mean, we took Yahoo's what they consider class 2 inventory.
So for a while I was in charge of class 2.
By the way, class 2 went from a $50 million business to a $1 billion business a year.
Yeah, but you
Right.
literally come to work every day and you're called a second-class citizen,
Yeah.
which is an
Right,
interesting
right,
branding
right.
exercise.
Yeah.
But,
That's when the black T-shirts start coming.
But that's a nice position to be in because you're not really expected. Like you're given something that no one really cares about. It's like when you're going in to go fix a company.
I disagree with that. I think if you're going to do something, you need to be given the resources to do it. You
Sure.
need to have the mind share amongst
Yep.
the executive team to do it. I agree with you. I mean, Yahoo was a collection of the smartest people I've ever worked with in my career.
Yep.
As opposed to companies I went to later on, where there was much less sort of brain power, but they were better at executing. There was less sort of middle management, malaise and distress, which is what ultimately.
So if I
Yahoo
can summarize
suffered
this,
from.
basically Nick was brought in, to make sense of the Right Media acquisition, made no money and did all the work. I made a lot of money and Nick did all the work.
I mean, we could probably just end it and conclude it right there. How good does it feel to say that?
It feels great. But I actually credit myself now because now Nick is hungry.
Right.
Because he's looking at all these people who made money.
Yeah.
And he was like, I got to make money.
Yeah.
I don't care about any of you guys that made money. I really don't at all. Like my drive is
By
internal.
the way, I'm not even joking. That's what drove me. When I was at DoubleClick, everyone I worked for made money. And it just stopped right before it got to me.
Yeah.
So then you're like, I need to be them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. I mean, there is a little bit of that. I mean, I went to a company called Demdex after I left Yahoo.
Yeah, Demdex was
Adobe
a great
acquired
success
us,
story.
60 days after I joined. I mean, it was going to be my startup experience, and I spent all of the time in their Times Square office doing due diligence.
Yep.
And then I went to Tapad, and we had a really good exit.
Great
there.
exit.
And so, yeah, I've done well for myself since then. But this
So you've actually, so I would say, forget about the upstate New York stuff. You've picked some winners.
Yep.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, even Webgistics, which who would have thought that
No,
that
doesn't. You don't get credit for that.
Yeah,
one,
I absolutely did. I literally wrote that software.
You're not getting. I agree with Bill. I mean, most people don't have one. I mean, in a lot of cases, there is tons of luck and timing, as we all know. That's the cliche. But those are. What did anything that you saw in the leadership, or was it the tech stack, or was it the position?
It was the problem that they were solving. Like that's how my mind works,
Okay.
right? I look for
so
a problem.
Tapad, cross device, of course.
So when I was at Adobe, we had our customers coming to us and saying, "You're doing a great job of collecting data on the web. You're doing an okay job of collecting data in mobile, but we don't want two different collections of data. We want one unified view." And so I actually put together an investment case to Adobe and said, "Hey, if we spend $5 million and hire 30 engineers and take 18 months, we can build this." And this was in 2010. We'll be the first ones to do it. they laughed me out of the room because that's just not sort of their internal philosophy.
Right.
And so plan B was to reach out to Tapad and say, hey, I'm not interested in the media business that you've built. I'm interested in the technology. Can I just license that and put it in my product?
The one they actually eventually shut down and sold.
The media business.
Yeah. I'm saying you were right about
totally. But when I said that to them, they had no idea what that meant. They had built a media business. They hadn't built a technology business, and so I joined to run product and strategy, basically to help them figure out how they build something, that was incredibly valuable, was going to solve a problem for me at Adobe, but they hadn't really thought about.
What was it like working with a Norwegian company? And obviously this is one that, if I recall, at early days had 2 different locations, right? Between Norway.
It was mostly New York. I mean, I've never thought of it as a Norwegian company. There was a Norwegian CEO and a Norwegian CTO. I don't think there was a lot of Norwegian culture.
Right.
There wasn't raw fish.
Chris always tries to bring in some sense of the Nordics into every conversation.
It's just they need to get more attention up there. I mean, there's only a few more
vitamin
people
D
there.
as well.
Yeah.
What? They need more vitamin D as well. There's not a lot of sun.
They're just happy. They're just happy people with their sauna, and they're good.
Yeah.
Sauna.
Yeah.
Okay. So 2 successful exits.
Yep.
You eventually say, screw this, I should start my own company.
Not really. I had a problem while I was at Tapad. We had a team of data scientists, and they were constantly coming to me and saying, we need more data to build better AI and machine learning and whatever it was. And we would go try to find it for them, and that process just sucked in every conceivable way. It just wasn't scalable. It took 6 months to go from them having a request to us getting it for them, and it just wasn't something that worked. And so I said, well, this is a problem that I'm having, and I'm sure other people are having it. Data science is now an applied science, and every company has them. Someone must have solved this problem. And so I looked around for probably 2 months looking for someone that had solved the problem.
You found nothing.
And I found nothing. I found a bunch of people that were solving components of the problem, but not the entire thing, and that we weren't checking all of my boxes.
Yep.
And so then I gave myself 6 months to say, okay, if you were going to do this, Nick, how would you do it? And I would go home every day and I'd write product specs and I'd wireframe things, and I would really spend a lot of time saying, is this a problem I think I can solve?
Yep.
And came up with an answer which, ironically enough, is articulated as almost right media for data. And it's taking a lot of the same concepts that right media use to enhance.
Can you explain for
Sure.
our audience that's never heard of right media before?
Yeah, I mean, so right media's broad concept was you used to buy advertising in bulk, right? You would say, I want to buy 1 million eyeballs on Yahoo on a Wednesday afternoon, and I'm willing to pay $1 million for it.
Yep.
Now, it might be that 800,000 of those eyeballs you didn't want to see or didn't care about your product, but it was just easy because you could go buy in bulk, you sign one contract, and you're done. What Right Media really did was let you make decisions on, which ads you were going to show in real time, ad by ad. So I want to buy this ad, I don't want to buy that ad. I want to buy this ad, I don't want to buy that ad. And it was much more precise. It was much more efficient. It allowed you to scale, businesses and things in a lot of different ways. And that's effectively the same thing we've done.
It's basically, advertising is one of the only commodities that hasn't been automated.
Yeah.
So the idea is, let's actually start treating advertising like stocks in the stock market. Let's treat it like NASDAQ. Mm-hmm. And so the concept was, the people started doing that for inventory. Nobody started doing that for data. Nobody started doing that for creative. So that was the idea.
Yeah, and it's entirely an efficiency play, right?
Yeah.
It's take something that was really hard and really inefficient in a bunch of ways and put product and workflow
and was the idea that there's so much data out there and it's so hard to differentiate that, hey, let me just create a marketplace and let the market decide what data is differentiated?
It's a little bit that, there's existed data marketplaces for probably longer than I've been alive. I think what we're really doing differently is we're focusing on the more sophisticated data user.
Yep.
Data science wasn't a thing 10 years ago. I mean, I remember when we were at Yahoo, we had data scientists and they were academics. All they do is they wrote papers.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't actually do anything.
Yeah. They were great papers.
Great is overstating it.
Bill, you've read all of them, right?
Not a one. Not a one.
And so, as data science has become an applied science and people are actually building products with it, they just have a different set of needs than, what folks have needed 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And the market that serves that, serves those needs hasn't evolved with the use cases. And so, it's a modernization of sort of the data stack broadly is how you can think about it.
Just to take a step backwards. So at this stage, you're obviously a product-driven co-founder, and CEO. We've had a couple of our guests that are product-centric,
Absolutely.
including Matt from Zenres. when we need to talk about that, but I definitely see some very interesting synergies, Josh McFarlane, as relates to the capability and skill set, and I think how important it is to be a product-driven CEO versus someone like me, which is commercially driven, meaning.
And by even Max, who's creating a business
Correct.
which is data science as a service.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have sort of the history or the experience in understanding where to start to build something that people want to buy, whether it's consumer or B2B, perhaps it's going to take a little bit longer. So meaning I definitely think that's a superpower in some extent to be able to see that picture and pull it together.
Yeah.
So let me just unravel it a little bit, because you're talking at like a level that a lot of people won't understand. So what is the exact problem you're trying to solve for now?
The problem that we try to solve for is make it easier to buy and sell data. I mean, succinctly put.
Yep. And your name of the company is?
It's Narrative.
Narrative. Yep. And when did you start it?
It's a hard question to unpack.
We know you were going home at night and writing product specs.
Yeah, I mean, we hired our first full-time employee.
When he was employed by the other company.
Yeah, no.
Edit.
We hired our first full-time employee Labor Day of 2016. So by that, a little over 3 years by that metric.
Nice. And how big is the company today?
We're 40 people today.
Yep.
Probably growing to 60, 75 people by the end of 2020.
And is the problem you're solving for 3 years later the same problem you thought of 3.5 years ago?
It is the same problem. I think sort of the scope of the overall problem has expanded. Early days we thought of it very much as the buying and selling is the thing that you're optimizing towards.
Yep.
It turns out you have to do a lot of stuff before you buy and sell and after you buy and sell. And so now we're trying to make those processes easier as well and make it more holistic. But it's largely the same problem.
Nick, one question I had is, as it relates to selling the product through, you always need your buyer, whether it's an Uber or Spotify or whoever it is, on the other end to actually understand how to implement, execute. You need that sort of customer internally. Can you talk a little bit about the evolution of what the customer has been able to do from day one to where they are now and where that's moving to? Meaning, is there less friction as it relates to kind of internal people saying, we need narrative, I know what to do with this, I'm going to integrate it?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely from a land and expand perspective, once we get into an organization and they realize the power of the platform, then they start telling their coworkers and other members of the product team and data science team, and so you definitely see expansion there. Admittedly, I think we've done a very bad job of defining the category that we play in and how our solution actually solves problems. And a big part of our strategy.
Who do you get lumped in with? And that really frustrates you?
LiveRamp.
Yeah.
And there's some shared DNA there. I'm not going to say that there's no similarities at all, but very much in the same way that I'm sure Right Media was lumped in with a bunch of ad networks along the way. You were trying to solve similar problems. You were just doing it in a very different way. I think that analogy is very apt in terms of what we're doing.
It's interesting. I can see both sides of the coin, though, sort of the frustrations of who you get lumped in with, but at the same time, if you're growing a business, it may be better to have some level of a comp.
Yeah,
so
100%.
Like if you're just the one thing swimming out there and see, it's like, wait a second, there's no one else out there. So I'd imagine there's more frustrations at first, but at least you're in a conversation.
It's a double-edged sword,
right?
Right.
Yep.
Right. Without that, you have to go do a bunch of education,
right.
And you have no sort of comp that you can refer to. But the joke is no one ever got fired for choosing IBM. I don't think that's true anymore.
Yeah.
But
no, it used to be no one ever got fired for buying Seinfeld.
Yeah. Right.
It was the safe choice.
Well, one story I want to share as it relates to being meeting Nick early on and becoming an angel and doing some advisory work back in the day was when I did my reference calls on all these people, and I did quite a bit on Nick. There's a level,
and you still invested
outside of the fact that he enjoys red wine more than the next person. And
true. It's better than the Goldschlager from my 20s.
By the way, did something happen to you in college with all your partying where you just got so ill that you went to red wine only?
So it's actually a funny story.
By the way, I am a huge
only red wine.
Only red California Cabs.
I'm New World, mostly Pinots.
And by the way, flying.
You know what? I'm done.
And by the way, flying cross country with Nick, which we've had, and we it's fun because you compete over your Delta status. So who's going to get the upgrade? And then 5 hours later, You see this guy, the's a lot of red wine on his tray. He's working the whole time, but he's crushing bottles of red wine.
So the funny I actually can't burp. Is a fun fact about me. I can, but I have to stick
Took us 40 minutes to get something.
I have to stick my finger down my throat to burp. And so
You're welcome.
In college, I started playing flip cup with wine because, by doing beer and just drinking foam and playing Beirut or any of those things. So, I was on the wine kick early on in my life.
The other thing, too, Bill, is so first of all, the calls around Nick as it relates to him being the right profile.
Yep.
Because we are lighthearted and fun here. They were very serious. The feedback was consistent as it relates to him being the right profile for a guy to take this company to the next level. When we started to get to know each other a little bit more, one of the things that I just found really interesting, and I was like, this is so weird that I want to back this guy is, and I'm sure you're not doing it as much, is he was doing basically like 10 to 15 mile walks like in the morning at 4 a.m. Before the day
still doing it. I checked on my walk when I walked into the office today. I've done 14 miles by foot so far today.
So not running, just walking.
No, I run now as well. So I usually it's a 4-mile walk to the gym. This morning I ran 6 miles, and then I walked another 2 miles to the office, another mile down to this office.
Well, then I want my money back. I did it because of the walking story.
Well,
and I thought that I was like, that is so that there's something there.
Yeah.
Like that's not the reason that you bet on somebody, but if you're walking 10, 14 miles over the bridge and through Manhattan, getting your thoughts together in Brooklyn, that's a very
yeah. I interviewed back in the day. It was like, 2001, interviewed at Google. This is when you had to interview with 10 people. Everyone had to say yes. And I interviewed with this one guy. Fast forward 2 days, I'm up in Westchester, and I see this guy. Like, he's a fast walker, but like not a pretty fast walker, like a sloppy fast walker.
Like
it was
arms everywhere.
It was almost like a Seinfeld episode or something. And second mention of Seinfeld, by the way. And then I actually couldn't look at him like seriously anymore.
But you knew the guy.
I knew the guy.
Did you pull?
He was one of the interviewers.
He was one of the interviewers.
Why wouldn't you slow down, pull the window down, and be like, bro? Like,
I was
tight,
like,
keep it tight.
But he was a sloppy. I mean, flailing all over the place. I don't know. We digress.
Yeah,
we digress.
You'd be better going slower and having.
But
good
you wake
form.
up at 4 a.m.
Yeah, 3:30ish usually. So I usually try to get in an hour worth of email.
Yep.
Then I head off to the
Fascinating.
gym.
I am so fascinated with how people manage their time and their day. What time do you go to sleep?
9:30, 10.
Yeah.
But I try to be home by 5:30. I try to spend some quality time with my wife and cook dinner every night. And so the choice I kind of have to make is like, do I blow up my mornings or do I blow up my evenings? Because I don't want to do both. And I find when no one else is up, I'm the most productive. Right? No one's responding to my emails. No one's asking me for anything.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So you pick winners, like what we've seen. You pick winners. You look at the problem, not the solution. How do you think you've evolved into a leader, right? Because when you start your own company, you're trying to, you have an itch you want to scratch. You have a problem you want to solve. You're driven. But then all of a sudden you wake up and you have 40 employees who look to you for guidance. Where are we going? Like, how has that transition been?
Yeah, I think it's a work in progress, as everything is. I think the thing that if you would have asked me 10 years ago, which skill sets are most important for a leader, I don't think I would have given you empathy as one of them. And I'm really trying to work on that and really trying to get much better at sort of putting myself in the shoes of the people that I'm leading and understand what drives them, understand how they're seeing situations, and then, hopefully, tailoring my management and my leadership based on that.
What happened or made you get to this point around empathy, that whether you lost somebody or employee feedback or
no, it's just like, when you're I've led product teams before, and when you run a team, you're very focused on what do I do that's best for the product team. You kind of optimize towards your functional area. And as CEO, I need to optimize towards the entire company. And part of that is I have to put myself in the shoes of the salesperson and the finance person and really understand what they're driving for and how they think about things. And so I've just had to become more empathetic at a broad base, on a functional level. And then it's pretty obvious that, within a given team, you're going to have a bunch of different personalities and a bunch of different people there. And so really understanding how they operate and how they perceive the world lets you be in their shoes and just be a more effective leader.
By the way, isn't it fascinating how it used to be you got to work hard. You got to be in the office. You want to get promoted, you have to be the last person there. It's all about time. Yeah. And now there's studies coming out saying, hey, 4-day work weeks increase productivity 20%. Yeah. People get up at 3:30 a.m. and walk 14 miles. Right. Clear their head, get their priorities focused, get shit done before anyone wakes up. Like now it's all of a sudden the whole model is broken. So do you give your employees that level of flexibility to decide their day?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in get your work done. I don't care if you get it done at 3 a.m. or 3 p.m. or if you do it at home or if you do it from the office. And I'd much rather people work smart than work hard.
Yeah.
I've worked with a bunch of people in my career that will put in the hours and will do a bunch of things. But if you actually look at what they're doing, they're just rearranging the papers on the desk. They're not actually producing anything of value. So I'd much rather have someone that works a 40-hour week but does it in a very thoughtful and a very purposeful way versus someone that works a 90-hour week, but half of those hours are spent doing nothing productive.
I think it takes time to get to that stage. Only experience and maturity will allow you to do that. When I was running App Savvy, unfortunately my brain capacity wasn't there. I had sort of this insecurity point where like if I didn't see people, I was wondering what they were doing. I wish I could take that back, but I definitely think with age and with experience, having been through a few companies, you get wiser and understanding like what drives people, right, and how to leverage that.
Totally.
So because you love it's about the problem, what problem are you solving for now? Right, like how is the problem evolved?
Yeah, so I mean we're going through a fundraising process right now, and the way venture-backed capital works is each stage in the process you're measured by certain things, and what's interesting is effectively the company and the personnel and the leader have to evolve every 6 to 12 months in some ways, and so as we close this round and as we move forward, my job is going to change quite a bit. Actually, my big problem right now is I don't know what my job is going to look like in 6 months. And, I'll figure it out because this isn't the first cycle that we've gone through. But I'm really trying to understand how, we set up the company to succeed and try to figure out where we need to be to get to the next level. But to be, perfectly honest, I don't necessarily know what that looks like. And so right now I'm just doing a lot of exploratory, what does a successful Series B company look like? Or how do you get to the point we're at now to the point we want to be in 12 months? And then how do I become effective at bringing us there?
Nick, what's been your fundraising experience and dealing with some of the venture folks? Obviously, we're
by the way,
who they are.
This is actually great. I'm sorry to cut you off.
It's okay. No, and we're obviously friends with some of these people because I tend to find where we are with raising our fund, there's always this terrible, sometimes it's misconception with venture and their interests and their motives and all that. And I think there's sort of there's kind of a wrong narrative like that. Yeah. What's been your experience? How have you managed it? Who have you chosen? Why? I'm sure some of it has fallen into your lap. It's like who's giving you your check, but anything that you can kind of share with the audience as it relates to the venture.
And I'm going to add one other thing, which is when you think about being a first-time entrepreneur starting a company, you think of all these hurdles. No one teaches you how to raise money, right? Nobody, there's so many aspects of being a founder and going through these processes where you're like, I didn't realize that term meant this.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, and you don't realize it until after you've agreed to that term.
Yeah.
When you're raising your next round, you're like, oh, that's really why you asked for that thing last round. I mean, the biggest thing that I learned, when I walked into the first fundraise that we did, and a firm out of California called Xseed Capital led it, was that I thought all venture, I thought it was a monolithic, set of people, And what I realized is like everything else in life, everyone has different theses, everyone approaches the problem in a different way, and so I really went out there and just said, hey, here's the narrative story, take it or leave it, and I got a bunch of no's as every entrepreneur does, and the no's were all over the place, and early on I was like, oh shit, I've got to optimize towards these no's, but what makes it a no for one VC makes it a yes for another VC. And so, just learning that you're going to get a lot of no's along the way, and for a bunch of different reasons, some of which matter, some of which don't, and you sort of got to go with the flow.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Anything else in regards to some of the people or the how your terms were set? I mean, I know, and it's somewhat loaded because I know how methodical you are as relates to here's what we're going to do over 12, 18 months. And as far as my involvement, I've actually seen you kind of achieve those, which is not always the case. So maybe that's allowed you to be in a better position as it relates to who you select or whatnot. But the answer could be like, hit your numbers, hit your goals, do what you say you're going to do.
And that's it. And that's I mean, as we run the company, we're entirely focused on hitting, setting the goals and then hitting those goals that we've set out. And, whether it's, our next round or it's an acquisition or it's us going public or it's us staying a very profitable private company at some point, you build a great company and great outcomes will come from that, be it terms or something else. And so all of my time is focused on how to build that great company and not worrying about what those outcomes will be. Because you build a great company, the outcomes will be there. Build a shitty company, then you've got to start worrying about 4 times liquidation preference and all of these other things that screw you down the line.
Is it ever difficult to not fall into the trap of, okay, the company is growing, the valuation's growing, I have a piece of X, I didn't hit my $1 million target when I was 30.
I go back to build a great company.
Yep.
Like I'll be fine.
I was just trying to get you to order the code red, but it didn't.
No.
You want me on that wall.
You can't handle the truth.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
So, I noticed you have like two. It looks like you have two wedding bands. Like they're both like black.
I've got 2 wives.
Okay,
my one wife is going to hate that joke. By the way.
No. We can edit that.
Edit.
So one of them is a sleep tracker. This is the Aura. So it's like a Fitbit for sleep that goes on your ring. And this is my actual
wedding band. They look very similar.
Yeah, actually,
but they're not.
My wife asked me. I wasn't wearing my wedding band one day. She's like, "Why are you wearing your wedding band on the right hand?" And I was like, "That's actually not my wedding band."
Couple things, Bill. First of all, I think it's very personal to look at our guests' hands.
I couldn't concentrate because I was like, "Oh, he has like wedding band is black."
I know he doesn't want to sleep with me because I like Pinot and not Cab. And that's not his type. So
listen, like anything else, when you were answering about the VCs, I was like, there are good VCs like Cabs, then there are bad VCs like Pinots.
Interesting.
And second of all, if you're a wearable company, maybe you just notice a really good sponsorship opportunity for Superpowers.
There you go.
I mean, I'm just saying.
There you go.
Great. So there's some fundraising ahead. There's the team's growing.
Yep.
Clearly, the data space is very exciting. You've created some efficiency in pipes as relates to buying and selling data, and you're learning. It sounds like quite a bit about yourself as relates to.
If we could do this weekly as a therapy session, that would be great.
I know it's good. It's good for us as well. We learn quite a bit as well.
You have to rename it the Uninteresting Podcast.
What percentage of your company is product and tech?
About a third.
That's it. I would have actually thought it was like much more.
Yeah. We're gonna get there. The truth of the matter, we're an enterprise driven sales company, so you need a big sort of sales team.
Yep.
The enterprise likes to be taken care of, and so you need to be a big customer success team, and then you've got all your finance and HR stuff, and so
or maybe it's that you're a product guy and you hired around your skill set.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, if I had an unlimited number of engineers, I'd hire an unlimited number of engineers because I've got a millennium worth of product roadmap in my head. But engineers are hard to find, and also I think you can get lazy, by thinking that you can solve the problem by just throwing more engineers at it. And so my team is going to hate this comment. I think us being a little bit more lean makes us be a little bit more scrappy, makes us think about the problems, makes us focus a little bit more. Whereas if we had an unlimited amount of capital, we'd probably waste most of it.
By the way, I could talk about that all day long, and just I think the how important it is to grow as it relates to what the size of your company actually is versus the more money, more problems. Yeah, you get a ton of money dumped on you. Now the goal is meant to go here. Now you got to hire quicker outside of your threshold, your capacity. You got to grow quicker, management problems. So I think that's a really interesting topic and debate as it relates to what is the right path and time frame.
By the way, we're gonna have Nick back in like 2 years, and we're gonna go through that.
Yeah, because now I'm getting to the superpower component.
We're about
Nick,
that time.
I got one more question as relates to any. Can you share some of the customers that you guys work with for our audience, or types or verticals?
Yeah, I mean, whatever
you're comfortable with.
Yeah, as with data, a lot of people sort of see that as their secret sauce, and so we don't talk about a lot of them publicly. I will say where we usually
ride-sharing companies,
ride-sharing companies, direct-to-consumer companies, digital native companies, folks that have been born in the last 10 or 15 years that have sophisticated, engineers, product people, data scientists on staff. I call them data sophisticates broadly. Mm-hmm. I think the nice thing for us is that pool is expanding really quickly. I mean, we work with some of the big television networks at this point. We work with a couple of Fortune 50 CPG companies, which historically I would not have called the most data sophisticated organizations in the world, but I think
they're getting there.
If you go to any company's job board, right, it's data scientist, data engineer,
100%.
And all I think what people will realize is they spend a bunch of money on infrastructure. They've spent a bunch of money on getting really big brains in the organization. Now they need to give them the raw materials to let them do their jobs, and that's really where we come into focus.
So we got a Western New Yorker guy who's working backwards. He's an avid walker. He's a red wine drinker. He's a diamond. He's a Delta Diamond who unfortunately I have to compete with when we're on the same flights together.
Yep.
He's obviously a product minded CEO. Bill, as we sort of hear Nick's journey and trying to sort of summarize his superpowers, what comes to mind? What did you hear?
So what comes to mind for me in terms of superpower, is him, a young Nick in upstate New York. The problem was, how far do we go into the woods to not get caught by the cops? He is always looking at what is the problem and how do I solve for that distinct problem. I think that's his superpower. What do you think?
I like it. I like it. I like it a lot. Yeah.
Right. I think so many people are like, what are the trends? Where is it going? Like, I have this amazing solution. Let me go find a problem. Like, it's almost refreshing to be like, here's the problem. I saw a problem, and he wasn't looking for it, right? So many entrepreneurs are like, I have to, like, it's my path in life.
I have to force. I'm going to force it.
Or it's my path in life to be an entrepreneur. He was doing his job. He ran into a problem doing his job and was like, huh. But then he didn't just jump into it. He then said, let me work nights and weekends and like spend 6 months writing specs. Can I solve for this problem? So it's like, he is the realistic problem solver. He's not like an entrepreneur found. I think the perfect entrepreneurship found you. You didn't find it.
That's right.
And that's actually very different from a lot of our guests.
I think it's great. I would just add that what I kind of picked up is this sort of accumulative experience that Nick has had in his career. You've been able to sort of pull from all these the companies that both acquired, the positions that you were forced to take. You were able to sort of accumulate all this knowledge and really equate it to get into a position of putting yourself into leadership and start a narrative. And I agree. It's I don't know if I have the ability to be able to identify a product problem so clearly and then be able to actually initiate and start it. So,
and the other thing I was thinking in the back of my head was he's actually picked winners his whole career, right? So, Right Media Yahoo might have screwed it up, but it was a huge winner, right? Mm-hmm. For solving a
100%.
problem and for Yahoo's revenue. Demdex, right? All the, you've picked winners.
Yeah. And I'd like to think it was because they were all solving a problem. And I looked at it and said, okay, the best companies are those that, solve a problem for someone. You want to buy something if it makes your life easier, if it solves a problem for you.
And that's interesting, Bill, as it relates to when you think about, again, listeners, how they may treat an interview process differently as it relates to this conversation.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a different set of questions that you should be thinking about as you look at a company. Outside of just a sexy headline.
Oh, 100%.
Right. Okay.
Amazing.
Awesome. Nick, we're wrapping up. We're obviously could talk with you a lot longer, but it's awesome to have you on Superpowers show, and we're glad that you could be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Nick.
Superpowers.